Welcome to the Faith and Mental Health Podcast, where two worlds collide. I am your host, DeAndrea Bolden. Join myself and others as we have relevant, engaging conversation on a variety of topics that are related to faith and mental health. So be sure to tune in weekly and also to subscribe. Did you know that you can listen to this podcast on all major podcast platforms, such as Apple, Google, and even Stitcher? You can even catch this podcast on my YouTube channel. As a listener, please know that we want to hear from you, and we hope that you would reach out with feedback, suggestions, and even ideas for guests and topics that you would like for us to include. Oh, do you mind helping me out by simply sharing this podcast with others? Thank you, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. God bless. All right. Hello to everyone that is tuned in. You are listening to the Faith and Mental Health Podcast. Today, I have a very special guest. I have LaToya Cheathon. She is, let me stop. I'm going to let her introduce herself. But today, we're going to be talking about, can a broken marriage be repaired? And so, LaToya, I want to turn it over to you. I want you to take a moment to introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on this show. My name is LaToya Cheathon. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I focus on working with couples, and that's what I've been doing for quite a few years now. I recently started also offering relationship coaching services with my husband. So that is what we are doing now, just working on helping people out with their relationships and their marriages, and just being there to support folks.
Awesome. So let's go ahead. We're going to jump into this topic. And I know, I think I said something to another guest for on another episode, but I know during this pandemic and all this isolation, it's been doing two things with relationships. Either people are getting closer together or they're saying, get me out of this. And so I want to talk about, we're going to be talking about, can this broken marriage be repaired? So first we need to define, what is a broken marriage? How can a marriage become broken? Like what does that really look like?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me with the broken marriage is just a marriage that's been where there's been problems for a while. You brought up a good point. The pandemic is a huge thing right now. A lot of couples that are coming into my office, that's what's bringing them in. But it's not necessarily that they've had all these issues that were outward the whole time, but a lot of them have been under the surface, people just functioning in their day-to-day lives. And then this pandemic hit, everybody's stuck at home, and then all the problems start to really surface again.
That's good. It's an alarm. But for those that are listening, so we're talking again about, can this broken marriage be repaired? And so I'm wondering, so you would say that a broken marriage is one where there's a lot of issues, whether spoken and unspoken, unresolved, things that people are not dealing with. So with your profession, and because you specialize and you deal primarily with couples, what are some of the things that you're seeing that are causing marriages to be so broken and so dysfunctional? Because I will say, as somebody that's been married over 10 years, marriage is hard. It is hard work. It's a lot of work. You have to see the ugly in you more than you try to see the ugly in your spouse. You have to give your spouse the same grace that you want them to give you, because you're not perfect either. But what are some of the big things you're seeing that is causing so much discord in a lot of marriages and relationships?
The biggest thing by far is communication. I'm noticing that couples just don't know how to communicate with each other in healthy ways. Most of the time, people are arguing, yelling, fighting a lot. And if they're not doing that, they are pretty much just shutting down and not talking to each other. Both of these extremes are not helpful in resolving anything. So conflict resolution is another big thing that comes up with my couples. People don't really learn how to fight fair. When we're growing up, our parents aren't necessarily always modeling good conflict resolution or good communication in the household. you know? And so when you get two people who didn't get that modeled to them and you put them in the same house, there's going to be a lot of unhealthy behaviors and patterns that are going on between the two of them. And then, you know, you do that for a few years and then people start to get a little hopeless. People start
Yeah.
to get frustrated. People start to think, what am I doing? Is this for me? Is there someone else out there for me?
Yeah.
You know, all those things, that those thoughts that start to come into people's heads, and just a lot of doubt.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
good. No, I'm sitting here listening because I know that communication is always, oh, he doesn't communicate or she doesn't communicate. And we hear that a lot. And I think sometimes we say things so much that people don't take it serious. Like, okay,
Hmm.
it's not that big of a deal. Okay. He doesn't talk that much. He don't want to talk about his feelings that much. But I even find that some people struggle to even get their significant other to even go to counseling with them to see someone like you that can help. I'm almost prone to wonder if people don't want to go because they don't want to hear the truth about themselves.
Mm,
Is
you said
that,
a
have
whole
you
word
found
right
that to
there.
be true or?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that is a big piece of it. There's a lot of finger pointing that goes on with the couples. You know,
Mhm.
just going back to just thinking of people growing up the way they are, and then becoming the people that they are as adults. We might not necessarily realize that we are part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that that was a big piece for me. We've been married, me and my husband have been married for 15 years now.
Mhm.
And early on in the relationship, it was definitely a lot of me thinking that I was only 5% of the problem and that he was obviously 95%. And if
Right.
he would just fix his 95%, then everything would be fine, you know? And oftentimes, the person who looks like they might be the bigger part of the problem is probably just displaying their stuff outwardly. The other person is
Oh,
likely displaying it inwardly.
that's
So
good.
it might not look like they're part causing a lot of issues, or you know, they're bringing things up. So they're like, well, hey, at least I talk about the problem. But how are you talking about the problem, and
That's
how is that
good.
making your partner feel?
That is really good. I hope somebody catches that. Some people display it outwardly and others display it inwardly. I think that was really, really, really good what you said. So I hope somebody grabs onto that nugget. And so, when we're talking about, marriage and relationships, what are some things? Because I think one part possibly of repairing broken marriages is for people to look at themselves. How do you
Mhm.
as a professional help people to stop pointing the finger at their significant other? Because it's human nature. Just
Mhm.
it ain't even got to be marriage. It's just human nature to see the flaws of others before you see the flaws of yourself. It's human nature to emphasize what people have done wrong to you and minimize what you've done. Like, well, I didn't mean it that
Mhm.
way. I didn't say it that way, but somebody blink at you wrong and you mad for 30 years. So what do you say to people that are really unwilling to be honest and take a deep look at themselves and
Mhm.
stop blaming their spouse for everything? I do understand that, yes, there can be a person that is single-handedly doing some things that is destructive towards their marriage. I get that. But I'm talking about in situations where there's just a lot of bickering back and forth more than anything else. Like, how can you help people begin to see that you're just as much as an issue as your significant other?
Mhm. Well, what I try to do with my couples is really just help them to see that each person has their own strengths and their own challenges. So it's never one person who does everything wrong or one person who causes all of the problems. It's always that these two people are basically just trying to get their needs met, and they're doing it in different ways. So, by trying to help the couples to really recognize the positives in what their partner brings to the table, it can be a little bit easier for them to recognize some of the ways that they're contributing to the challenges. So, you know, the I feel like the important thing to do is to learn to listen to your partner, to learn more about what their perspective is.
That's good.
People have the tendency to hear what they're this is what I tell people all the time. What we do as humans is we talk, or I'm sorry, we listen in order to figure out what holes we can poke in what the other person's saying, so that
Mm,
we can make sure that what we need to communicate gets said.
yeah.
And we're doing that because oftentimes we're concerned that if we don't speak up and say what we need to say, then the other person's never going to hear.
Mhm.
But in a couple relationship, if both people are doing that, no one's ever really going to be able to hear the other person because they're just listening to interject and have a response.
That's good.
So something that I try to teach my couples to do is to listen with curiosity. Learn more about why your partner is having these feelings, why they're expressing this to you, rather than trying to tell them that they're wrong or being defensive about it.
That's good. That's good. That's really good. And I think that's true. People do listen to respond instead of understand. I think that's
Mhm.
something that we deal with a lot, and especially, and I want to tackle this one. What, what do you do? Because a lot of issues with a lot of couples is coming from silent communication in the form of text. Text can
Mm.
easily be misconstrued. I can't see your face, your body language. It's very impersonal. So I don't have to actually deal with you. I can just say what I need to say and just put my phone down. And so is that something that you've been seeing a lot as well, dealing with couples? Um, and then my other question, so this is two part. I also want to know, what do you say to couples that have a lot of issues with unforgiveness?
Mhm.
Because I believe in any relationship, a friendship, marriage, whatever. I just believe that you have to give the other person grace within reason. I mean, some stuff, forgive, but you got to get out of my life.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
ain't finna be, throwing me down a flight of stairs and running me over. Like, it's over. You know what I'm saying? But being able to forgive and not always trying to be right. So
Mhm.
what are some things you're saying as far as like how social media is affecting relationships, like texting and social media? And then also how people can learn to be more forgiving, because if everybody is mad and y'all going weeks without speaking, you ain't even winked at each other in months. Like, how
Mhm.
can we deal with people that are just so stubborn like that, to where they don't realize they're killing their marriage by trying to stay angry?
Yeah, yeah, that happens a lot. As far as your first question with the text messaging, man, that is so true. That the communication that we're sending via text and even via email
Hmm.
is it can really be misconstrued. You can't read a person's body language. You can't really hear the inflection in their voice and what they're really trying to communicate. And it's so easy to get defensive or have some sort of a response that where you're offended by what they just said to you. So I recommend that my partners actually, I recommend that they have weekly meetings where they sit down and they just talk.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be long. It could be 30 minutes, but just a time that's designated to talking about the things that are going on in your relationship. It can be so healing for the relationship because, as we're talking about, oftentimes people can go days and weeks and months and sometimes even years without talking about the things that
Yeah.
need to be talked about. So, just prioritizing the time together and using that time for communication can be so helpful in a relationship. You also talked about the unforgiveness piece of it. The as far as that goes, I think that that's a big part too. People can shut down and refuse to speak to the other person, and then even once they start talking again, maybe they sweep everything underneath the rug and they think they're moving forward. One person or both of them can continue to harbor that unforgiveness. And what I usually tell my couples is something that I heard years and years ago, which was let the person who's the most mature apologize first. And the reason why that really hit home to me is like nobody wants to be the one who's the most immature. Everybody wants to be the one who's the most mature in the
Right.
relationship. So what things can you apologize for? What was your role or your portion of the conflict that happened? It may not mean that you take responsibility for the whole thing, but there had to be something in it that you could have done differently that could have changed the outcome of the situation. So I encourage people to apologize. Try to be the first one to apologize because somebody's got to be first if you
That's
want to move forward.
right. That's very true. Now, what this is good. I'm hoping this is really going to help some people, because I'm telling you, like, COVID is, I mean, I think it was the mayor of Atlanta, like her husband had put something out on the internet basically saying he didn't like being at home. And I'm like, wow.
Oh,
Like it was something to that. I'd had to find it again. And she kind of like joked about it or, whatever. But I know that had to be like a bruise, to her ego. It's like, come on, dude. Everything you think don't need to be said. But
yeah.
what about situations where one person wants to make the relationship work and the other one does not? What is your advice for someone that is in a situation like that?
Ooh, that's a good one. That really just depends so much on a lot of different things. But what I will say is, I can speak from my personal experience. Years ago, my husband and I had split up. We were separated. And my challenge in that was that I was really trying to work hard to get the relationship back together. But it wasn't going the way that I wanted it to go. All the little tools that I usually use, all the little ways and mechanisms and methods that I would use to try to repair things weren't working. And so what I did was I actually had to throw my hands up and turning to God and working on me, working on my faith, and
That's good.
trusting that He was going to work it out. That's where I had to get to. Now, that was not an easy task for me to get there. It took me a
Right.
long time. It took me weeks to really get to a space where I could relinquish control. But ultimately, what I had to realize is that if my husband was not in it, then I couldn't make him be in it. I could
Right.
work on me. I could connect with God. And I could do my best to handle the things that were in my control. But ultimately, it was something that he needed to work on with God on his own.
That's good.
And that's what we did, and it worked out, and God came through and just changed our relationship to a place where I never thought it could be, and he never thought it could be either. So it was a miracle how the whole thing turned around, but we started out just like that.
That's good. That's good. That's good. I think that's really good. I like the part where you said if your husband didn't want to be in it, there was nothing you can do. And I think
Yeah.
that can be helpful to people. It can be hurtful. The reality of that can be hurtful.
Mhm.
But I believe your statement and sharing that can be helpful because we have to realize that our spouse has their own mind, their own will. They are their own person. And so if they don't, you can't force someone to love you, you can't force someone to
Mhm.
stay, you can't force someone to be with you, but you can work on yourself. And I think that is kind of the theme that's kind of
Yeah.
been going through this conversation today, whether married or wherever you are along in your relationship journey, is that, it's important to work on yourself. And so what about repairing marriages that have been tainted by adultery, by one or both of
Mhm.
the
The
partners?
parties.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, you know, I believe that marriages can be healed after infidelity. Actually, I was just recently in a class, and that's what they talked about. The majority of infidelity that happens in a marriage, the couples do go on to reconcile and move forward in their marriage. So now, just because someone's moving forward doesn't mean that they're healed, though, right?
Right.
So that's an important distinction. But if both parties are ready to move forward together, they want to recommit to the relationship. It's a journey. It's a long journey of building trust all over again, and but building a better foundation with it.
Hmm.
That's necessary. I like to describe that to my couples as trust is like a brick wall. It
Hmm.
gets knocked down. You got to build it back brick by brick. It takes a lot of time. And then if during that time you're rebuilding, something else comes up, there's another issue that happens that breaks trust again, then that might knock the wall down again. You got to start from the beginning, building it again. So it's a process, it's a journey. But if both partners are committed and both partners are, have made the promise that they're not going to step out again and things like that,
Hmm.
and both people are ready to move forward. And I mean, going back to God, just really having him in your corner as the healer. I do believe that marriages can be healed.
That's good. That's really good. Especially, when we put God first and allow him to be a part of the equation, he can do what only he can do, and he can do
Mhm.
that best. And that's really heal, the I like how the word says that he's near the brokenhearted and he binds their wounds. And so God is
Mhm.
able to bind our wounds and really heal our hearts and really heal those broken hearts. And so I know we have a couple minutes left, and so I wanted to ask a couple more questions because I think these are great questions. What advice do you have for somebody that wants to be married and has never been married? Because I be seeing them doing these six-figure weddings, and I'm like, 6 months later, they what? What you mean they divorced? The wedding
Yeah.
ain't even paid off. What you mean? I want you to address some must before people get married. I always tell people, I personally think a good 6 months or so of counseling before you get married is important because you got to see
Mhm.
what they junkie is. They need to see what your junkie is, and you may both see that y'all both too junky to be together.
Yeah.
Just because, like I tell people, just because you love somebody don't mean you're supposed to marry them. Just because you feel a certain way and your tail is tingling, 3 months later, you may be trying to run the person over. I mean,
Yeah.
that doesn't mean you marry a person. And so just like some tips for people that want to be married, and also some advice to maybe those that may be newly married, some things they can do to try to stay together, because I believe that in some situations, not all, I believe in some situations, a little more patience, a little more understanding, a little more counseling,
Mhm.
and a little more
Yeah.
maturity and some more forgiveness. And some couples really could have made it. I've seen a lot
Yeah.
of people have regret, like I should have never got divorced, but it was too late. The ball was rolling, the papers were signed, and everybody was lawyered up. So I want you to speak to those two
Yeah.
things really quick.
Yeah. So, as far as for the people who have not been married, the biggest piece of advice I would give anyone is to do counseling. Work on yourself, working on figuring out what kinds of baggage you're bringing into the relationship. Because everybody has baggage, everybody has history, everybody has things that have happened in their past, patterns that they've learned in their behaviors. And it's so valuable if you could start working on that stuff before you meet the person who you're going to be with. So I would recommend individual counseling and a lot of soul searching, working on self, learning more about you. And then once you find the person who you feel like is the one for you and you want to marry them, definitely highly, highly recommend premarital counseling. Because, like you said, that's going to give you the opportunity to learn more about what kind of baggage they're bringing in to the relationship and really make sure that this is something that you want to get into. No. So that's definitely my recommendation for premarital people. The people who are already married, I hate to just say it's the same thing, but it's the same thing. Recognizing that you don't have to have a bunch of problems, and things don't have to be on their last leg before you decide to go get counseling.
That part right there.
Yeah. Yeah, so many people wait so long that you have years and years of resentment and frustration and problems just piled on top of each other. Then you go
Sure.
into counseling, and I mean, by all means, come. I want you to come to counseling still, but it would be so much more beneficial if you can catch these things before they get to that level. So I would definitely recommend that for people who are newly married. In addition, I would also recommend that you get set up in some sort of a community with other newly married people.
Mhm.
I know that for me, that was something that was a game changer for my relationship. Just meeting, we actually went to a church that had a premarital, or I'm sorry, a recently married group,
Okay.
young marrieds. And it was so helpful to go in and sit at the tables with these other couples who were newly married like us.
Mhm.
And they were dealing with a lot of the same things that we were dealing with. Now, the enemy wants us to believe that we're the only ones dealing with something.
Come on.
Yeah, yeah. He wants us to not talk to anybody about it, to hide it, make sure nobody finds out, because if anybody found out, then they would know our secrets. The
Yeah.
reality is, everybody's dealing with something.
Right.
So I highly, highly recommend that newly married people get connected with other newly married people, and then also
Good.
engaged people. You know, we had engaged people in our group too. But just to start learning the tools and the skills that you need for a successful marriage, and to be with people who are like-minded, who are for your marriage, and who are going in the same direction as you are.
That's good. That was really good. So I'm hoping some people hear this advice because I'm definitely going to be sharing this and promoting it once
Yes.
this comes out. And so I'll get back with you as far as the day that I'll put it out and it'll be available and stuff like that. But I just want to thank you because you dropped some nuggets and I was like, that's it. That's good. I mean, you definitely, when somebody is a specialist in a certain area, they can see things from another way, from another view, from another perspective. And even if I took you and put you next to another therapist, if their specialty is not marriage and family, they're not going to be as skilled as you are. They're not going to
Mm.
see things the way you see it. And so I just applaud you because you gave a lot of wisdom. And I also thank you for even sharing some of your personal experiences that people may be able to relate to. But I want you to take a moment. Feel free to have last thoughts and let people know how they can contact you and connect with you.
Yes, yes. Well, I first of all just want to say thank you so much for inviting me. I'm glad that I got to come on here and share. I am all about trying to help marriages, help relationships. It's something I've been passionate about since I was in middle school, actually. I knew this is what I wanted to do.
Wow.
So I'm very thankful for the opportunity to help out couples. And you know, the one of the ways that I am able to help couples is just the transparency piece. So just being real about it, because I feel like this is something that is so stigmatized in our society. People don't talk about it. And so it's so important to be open and share our experiences to help normalize it for other people so that they can have some hope. Now, if y'all want to get a hold of me, I am located at on Instagram. You can find me at the Couples Wellness Spot. I'm also at the Couples Wellness Spot on Facebook as well.
That's good. That's good. So thank you so much. So I hope you guys and gals, or whoever is listening, that you would take the time, reach out to her if you are, newly married, thinking about getting married, or if you've even been in the game a while and you're like, okay, we need to fix some things. I would recommend that you reach out to someone like LaToya Cheathon, that can, kind of help you and guide you in that area, especially if you are in Georgia, because I'm assuming you're licensed in Georgia, correct?
Yeah, so I'm seeing clients in Georgia, North Carolina,
Oh, you got multiple
Florida, and
dual license.
California.
Okay.
Yeah, and then as far as my coaching program with my husband, we actually can do that anywhere because
Okay,
it's
yeah,
not
you
state
got your
by state.
coaching. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, of
Yeah.
course. So yeah, so check out the coaching program and all that. And so thank you to you guys that are tuning in. I want to admonish you again. If you haven't, please go to themergeconference.com. Check out the upcoming Faith and Mental Health Summit. It's going to be virtual this year, April 23rd through 24th. I love you guys and thank you for tuning in. Bye-bye.